Hello to all of our listeners, and welcome back to The Parent Solution, your one-stop shop for all things educational. So I am your host, Kimberly, and today is a guest episode. I have a special guest here with me today. His name is Dr. John DeGarmo, and he has a very unique and entertaining sort of position on our podcast show today. So he is a father to 60, yes, that is 60 children. He has worked and performed on stages around the world. He is also an award-winning author of 10 books. He's worked with legislators in Washington, D.C. He's been a TED Talk speaker, and he's worked in professional wrestling, as well as working with legislators in D.C. He's experienced quite a bit. So he's a TEDx Talk speaker. He's a leading expert in foster care and parenting, and he's the director of the Foster Care Institute. He conducts seminars across the world on foster care, child sex trafficking, adoption, and child welfare related issues. He's had many articles, as I said, that have been published worldwide that have appeared. He's appeared on CNN, HLN, Good Morning America, ABC, CBS, Fox News, NBC, and elsewhere. His one book that we are going to talk about today is Keeping Foster Children Safe Online, as well as Fostering Love, One Foster Parent's Journey. As a parent himself, of course, by now, hopefully figured out that his 60 children are biological, adoptive, and foster that he's had come to live with him and his family. Currently, I believe he has 10 children living in his house and within his family. He wrote his doctoral dissertation on the topic of foster care, and he's considered one of the leading experts in the field of parenting, adoption, child welfare, and foster care. He's also hosted his own radio program, Parent Factors, with Dr. John for several years. Dr. John, welcome. That was quite the introduction. Applause, sir. Applause.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the opportunity.
Of course. It's really good to have you here. Did I miss anything in your intro? Is there anything you want to add there?
No, you got plenty. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. So, I mean, you have lots to offer. This is going to be a great conversation today. Why don't you start with telling our audience a little bit about like your foster care experience? Because like 60 children, holy smokes, that's a lot.
Well, it wasn't anything I really planned on setting out doing. I didn't have any vision of being a foster parent or plans or adoptive parents. It was, I believe the myths and misconceptions associated with foster parenting, that the kids are bad kids and the foster parents are weird people. That part's true. Well, foster parents are a little bit strange, a little bit because it's not a normal lifestyle that we live. You know, children are placed in foster care system for abuse and neglect, abandonment. So when they're placed into a foster care home, you can imagine they're filled with lots of anxiety, lots of disorders, experiencing forms of trauma. So, you know, it's a challenging time for foster parents to be sure when the child's placed in the home. It's a different kind of lifestyle. It's a different kind of parenting, to be sure. So I didn't set out to do that, but my wife, who's from Australia, and we thought, how can we help other kids? We had suffered some losses in our lives. We thought, how can we help other children who are suffering, children in crisis? You know, in the United States, on any given year, there are roughly 5 million children experiencing domestic violence inside their home. And we know those rates rose, of course, during COVID, when we locked the kids at home with their abusers. There are 300,000 children victims of human trafficking. There are 800,000 children missing in the United States. That means in every single community, there's a child crying out for help. So my wife and I thought, you know, we've experienced some losses. How can we help other children? And that led to 60 plus kids in the house. We've had as many as 11 at the same time in our house, as young as 27 hours of age and as old as 18 years of age while placed in the home for foster care. So it's been quite an adventure, to be sure.
Right. Well, I mean, first things first, like kudos to you, because I mean, that is a lot to take on. Being a parent is hard enough. Being a foster parent, which means you're taking on potentially other people's drama and other people's kind of backstories and all of the generational things that go along with that is I think just as admirable, even if not more so, because of the nature of foster parenting. So kudos to you, first of all. I think that deserves merit in itself. So how do you then, just in terms of talking about like your experiences, so what are some of the common things that you notice, maybe not within your own experience with the 60 or so, but I know you've had experience with, I assume, other foster parents as well. What's your experience with dealing with things like safety and dealing with things like protection and whatnot for these foster kids that often are in very vulnerable situations?
Well, you're right. They're very, very vulnerable children, and predators recognize their vulnerability and swoop in many times to lure them in with false hopes and false promises in hopes of bringing them into the human trafficking world. When we as a society made the decision in 2020 to close our schools, which I think was a tremendous mistake, by the way. And we're seeing that now with pandemic learning loss and some of those other issues. When we locked them at home, these children in foster care who are 18 months behind academically, who are struggling with reading and math skills, and they're no longer getting their support services they need in school. They're no longer getting the professional therapy services in person that they need. They're no longer getting their visitations with their birth parents or biological family members that they need for reunification. And they're home 24 hours a day with strangers, foster parents, and their anxiety levels are through the roof. Well, foster parents are telling me, I'm not a teacher. I'm not a professional therapist or counselor. I can't do visitations virtually online 5 days a week. And they might have their own concerns, and their anxieties are through the roof. A lot of times those children were going online in the pretense of doing their schoolwork. And we know now that children were not doing their schoolwork online when they were home. They're doing anything probably but that, the majority of them. So these children are going online from foster care who have suffered tremendous abuse, who have suffered neglect, who are looking for some sort of normalcy. They don't want that label of a foster child. And they're looking for love because they don't have any control of their lives. They don't have control of being removed from their home, removed from mom and dad, removed from all they know, and placed into a time of tremendous uncertainty and confusion. A foster care home. They're asking questions like, why am I here? When do I go home? Will I ever see mommy and daddy again? Does anybody love me? Is it my fault? So they're going online, trying to get some type of control, if you will. And that's when those predators recognize their vulnerability and lure them. So many kids have been lured in from human trafficking through online predators. So, that is a danger that many foster parents experience. How do we protect these children from the many, many dangers associated with social media, particularly children who are so vulnerable to that? That's one thing I hear often from foster parents. I also hear that they're burned out or they're suffering from something known as secondary traumatic stress or compassion fatigue. I love that word, compassion fatigue, exhaustion from compassion, from caring so much. So foster parents struggle with that because they don't get the support services they need. Again, when we had the time of lockdown, caseworkers could not go in person to visit the foster parents. The foster parents are crying out, I need help. So they were not getting any sort of help whatsoever. So we lost a lot of good foster parents during that time when we needed probably more than ever with more children coming in to the system. So it's a challenging time right now to be sure for foster parents. They're really struggling.
Right. So the issue then comes, my impression was that it's more about, obviously the focus is the foster children, because they're in foster care, most of them for a reason. And I would imagine that it's not pretty. I did have some friends when I was younger, when I was a child, that were in foster care, and their home situations were not the most pleasant. And so that was why they were in foster care in the first place. But you raise a really good point, is that it's also the foster care parents too that need support and that need that sort of network to be able to have that break. And that's not to say, I'm sure you'd agree with me, that's not to say that foster care parents are incapable of doing the job or anything like that. It's just to say that they sometimes need a break, as we all do.
They do. And, when you have children come into your home who have anger management issues or trust or attachment, or maybe reactive attachment disorder or sleeping disorders or eating anxieties, or maybe a combination of all of that, and you mix that into your family dynamics, that's tough. It can be very, very challenging, particularly when you have no support system. Listen, I've written so many books, TED Talks, traveled around the world doing this, and my own friends and family members don't truly understand this unique lifestyle that I live. It's such a different form of parenting. Very rewarding, mind you, but challenging. So foster parents need that sense of community, which they were not getting. And a lot of them just said, I can't do this anymore. So hard. So they walked away. Caseworkers today are overworked, overwhelmed, under-resourced, under-supported, understaffed, and underpaid. And And a lot of caseworkers are also leaving their careers after maybe 18 months, 2 years. Same with foster parents. Your average foster parents last about 18 months before they say, hey, this is so hard. I can't do this anymore. But I also want to say that it has been the most rewarding thing I've done. Every child's made me a better person in some way. And in my house, there's no label. There's no biological or foster, adoptive. They're all my children. And we love each of them like our family.
Because they are your family. I was
Yes,
just saying, they are your family.
Right.
And they just happen to be family that, I mean, I guess you don't necessarily choose, but they happen to be family that you choose to be in their life, and you choose to take an active role in their life, and you choose to support them in that way. I'd like to focus a little bit on online safety, because I know that with myself and with the parents that happen to come to Star Student, online safety is a really big thing that we push, and online literacy, digital literacy is a really big thing that we support. You cannot send your child into the world. This goes for anything, not just online. You cannot send your child into the world not being prepared to deal with uncomfortable situations or dangerous situations. You just have to do your best as a parent to prepare them for that. We tend to focus on the digital side of that because we are able to. That's something within our capabilities, right? But I'm curious to hear your thoughts. I'm curious to hear your kind of impressions and what you think, because I know you've actually written a book, Keeping Foster Children Safe Online, I believe is the title. Could you maybe share some insights on the unique sorts of challenges? I know you touched a little bit on that, but the unique sorts of challenges that foster children might encounter in the online world?
Sure. And I want to say that book is really for anybody who parents any sort of child, because these dangers are not associated necessarily with children in foster care. But there are particular dangers for those children in foster care because they, again, are so vulnerable. These are the most vulnerable children. And since they are so vulnerable, they're really easy for predators to recognize their vulnerability, and again will lure them in with false hopes and false promises, because these kids are just going online looking for one thing: love. They're looking for someone to accept them, normalcy without the label of foster care, and to love them. Because many times they're coming from an environment where they had no sort of positive, unconditional love in their life. So for those predators who are behind the keyboards with false hopes, false promises, false personas, if you will, promising them, hey, I'll take care of you. I'll help you. I'll love you. I'll help you get a job. I'll be your family. Those children are so desperate and they'll run away to that. So we're seeing a lot of kids from foster care who are online, creating relationships with people that they really don't know, dangerous relationships, and running away to them and ending up victims of human trafficking as a result, which is just horrific. That's just one of the dangers. There's so many others. They can, there are those scams they might fall to. There are dangers. Of course, there are very, very inappropriate and dangerous games out there they might be playing with along with other predators online. They might have access to their birth parents' information through social media that can be very, very disruptive for a healthy mental lifestyle.
Right.
Sure. There are lots of concerns and dangers. And I tell foster parents, this is not we don't live in the Brady Bunch in Gilligan's Island anymore. This is a very different kind of world. And what they're seeing online is, they're being exposed to online. So many foster parents don't really have that type of knowledge because they're not truly invested, particularly those older foster parents who don't understand the online world, don't understand social media. You and I, we live in the online world, but the children today, they inhabit that world. And there's a big difference there. Right.
I like how you made that distinction. I was just going to say there's a difference between living, as you say, and inhabiting, right? When I was born, technology was just coming out. When the internet was just kind of a thing, like a new thing when I was born. So and my father was in IT. So we did have computers growing up. We did have access to technology, but we were very much supervised. We were very much, I don't want to say controlled, but monitored perhaps would be a better word, right? We had specific time that we were allowed to do our homework, right? If we needed to research things. I was able to Google a few things. I didn't grow up without Google. Unlike my parents, right? They just had to find something out or look it up in the dictionary.
There's something I did, yeah.
But my dad being in IT, he actually built, because he is a little bit older, he's of an older generation, he actually was a computer analyst and he built software for a very large company. And he was the one that very much stressed to all three of us kids. He said, you be careful what you put online because once it's there, it stays there forever.
Right.
Doesn't matter if you delete it. Doesn't matter if it disappears. Doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Somebody who's good enough will find it. So watch what you put online. So I grew up in a household where digital literacy was important for safety reasons, for knowledge reasons, right? We were exposed to it, but within a certain guided parameters, if you want to call it that. And my parents were very good at controlling the internet. They do have parental controls. They can like shut the internet on and off.
Right.
And some kids today might think, oh my goodness, that's abuse, right? Like controlling the internet. But, but that brings up my next kind of point is balancing this idea, as you're saying, of independence and safety. Because in today's society, children are very much exposed to technology and exposed to the internet at a younger age. So would you be able to perhaps provide some insight to our audience as to how parents can kind of strike a balance between like allowing their children to explore and then also ensuring their safety while they are online?
Right. And I think you said a few words there, balance. You got to have that healthy balance and to ensure their safety. In our house, my wife will often go through the phones of our children to make sure that they're not communicating with somebody who is dangerous or somebody's dangerous reaching out to them or they're not looking at appropriate material. And some people might say, you're invading their privacy. And our response is, no, we're protecting a child. And if we're not going to do it, then who is? So yeah, you have to have the healthy balance, between, in our house, they might get an hour a day with technology. That's about it. Unless they're doing schoolwork. And
Right.
if they're doing some type of entertainment online, we're going to make sure that it's appropriate. I'm going to look and see what are they watching? What are they playing? And then turn the computer off. Let's go outside and play. Let's go outside, go swimming or biking or throw the frisbee around or go outside and, play and jump in mud puddles, whatever it might be, that healthy balance. Because they can't be spending all their time online because, my goodness, there's so many detriments to that. So that's important. Parents also need to use the word monitor and supervise. That is critical. I need to know who is contacting my child online. I need to know who my child is talking to online because and I also tell parents, our children do not need to have 1,000 friends online because they're not going to know the vast majority of them. So if you say take 10% of that who are dangerous people, it's a lot of people. That's a lot of people who are a danger to them. So my children actually have to know who their person is they're talking to online in person. And they're not going to friend anybody that they don't know in person. That's critical. So we're supervising, we're monitoring, we're watching their parental blocks as well, as you mentioned. You could have those or special filters or just just plug in the internet, plugging it off the wall. Sometimes we do.
Yeah.
Of course, phones are not in their rooms at nighttime. And, we don't even begin to have the discussion about getting a child a phone until the very least they're a ninth grader in high school. And that's when the discussion begins. Does that mean every ninth grader is going to get a phone? No, it's not. It depends upon their maturity level, their responsibility level. Their frontal cortex is not fully developed until they're 25 years of age. Some suggest now 30 years of age because of the damages of social media doing to it. So they can't make rational, mature decisions at such a young age. I see children when I fly back and forth to various events across the globe, and I see young children 4 or 5 years of age on phones. I think to myself, goodness gracious, this is not a good path to go down.
Yeah. Yeah. That's another one I know. And that's not, I mean, we could definitely go there. I know that I see sometimes, 3, 4, 5-year-old kids playing on phones. And while I understand the need for distraction and I understand the need for the parent to have a break, that just raises the question to me of like, what other sorts of problems are you causing with that child? You mentioned that you have the conversation with your kids about getting a phone in high school. I myself also did not. I didn't have a phone until I was in grade 11. I would have been 16 at the time, 16, 17. And I didn't have a phone then. And the only reason I got one was because I needed to be able to contact my parents because I was on the wrestling team. And so they had to pick me up and whatnot from extracurriculars. They didn't want me having to go and rely on other people. They put that onus on me. And so that was when I got a phone. But other than that, I didn't I wasn't attached to a phone. I didn't grow up with that sort of mindset, right?
Right. I don't think I got my phone until I was, believe it or not, 45.
Wow.
Because I was in an airport stuck in Iowa and it was snowed in and I couldn't get a hold of my wife. And she said to me, I also had to borrow someone else's phone because I just did not want one. I just saw the dangers associated with it. And then Mara said, you've got to have one. So I got one. A lot of our social media, again, I go back to 2020 when we shut our kids down and they go online and looking at these things. We have a 70% increase in teenage suicide attempts. We have teenage depression on the rise, teenage anxiety on the rise. Pardon me?
Since 2020?
Correct.
Wow.
Correct. Because since we placed these children at home online, teenage depression is skyrocketing. Teenage anxiety is skyrocketing. Teenage addictions are skyrocketing. Again, 70% increase in teenage suicide attempts since COVID. And all of this is because we force these children to go home inside their house, be online.
Yeah.
Sometimes their parents are not there. They're at work or they're wherever they might be, or they're in another room. And there are so many mental health aspects of social media that are just so dangerous. These children, they just continue to fall deeper and deeper and deeper to it. 70% increase in teenage suicide should be a very alarming. It should be a tremendous alarm for all of us as a society. What have we done here to these children?
Yeah. Yeah. It's not funny, but it's funny that you say that, because when 2020 happened, I actually was just graduating teachers college at the tail or the beginning of 2020. I graduated from teachers college in April of 2020. And one of my first questions as pushback was it was. One of my first questions was, what sort of long-term effect is this going to have? Have we thought about the long-term effects? And I certainly didn't have an answer. Like, by no means did I have an answer. Did I know how things were going to turn out? I'm not a psychic. But that was my first question as to what sort of ramifications we were going to be looking at 3-4 years down the road. And not even 3-4 years, think 10 years, think 20
generation. There's a generation lost. And I made the same comment in April 2020. I was asked by a journalist on TV. I said, what is shutting down the schools going to do for children in foster care? And my response was, I am far more concerned about the mental health aspects of this than I am of any virus for children. Mm-hmm. And we're seeing that now come to fruition. Mental health aspects are dangerous. We just rush to fear as a society. And there are some of us who are saying, hey, slow down, hold on. What is the end result of this? Children, children. We're seeing the results now, and it's grim. There's a generation who are suffering tremendously, not only through mental health aspects, but educationally. They're so far behind right now. We're seeing that test results. We're seeing that in young children who are struggling to learn how to read now during those formative years.
Yeah.
And we locked them away. Yeah. Or think about this little 3 or 4-year-old child who's told, don't hug mommy, don't hug daddy, don't hug grandma. You could kill them.
Yeah.
What is that doing to their mental health? I can't touch somebody. Well, yeah.
Yeah. And that was one thing that my father always said. We were raised in a house, which it's funny. It's ironic that I'm in the business I am now of like I like to say, if you notice here, teaching children how to think, not what to think. My father always stressed to us, with everything, you ask questions. You always ask questions. And if something doesn't make sense, you keep asking questions until you get a satisfactory answer. And if that answer is not satisfactory to you, you reserve the right, as long as you're not physically harming somebody else, to say, no, I don't think so.
I love it.
We took that away. From so many young kids.
We did. And I love what your father said. When I taught English and history at high school level, I would always end my classroom with the same response. Question everything.
Everything.
Because what I'm telling you might not be true. Mm-hmm. Do your own research. I also tell my own children, question everything. Mm-hmm. And we did take that away. If we questioned something that we might not agree with, or if we had questions about during this time frame, we were labeled as dangerous or whatever it might be. So in
Conspiracy.
our house during 2020 and 2021, my wife and I made the conscious decision again in April 2020. My wife's a doctor of nutrition,
Mm-hmm.
and we made the conscious decision that we're going to live a normal lifestyle. We're not going to
Right.
adhere to all these restrictions simply because of the mental health aspects for our children, because we could see where is this going to lead to? If we do this, what could be the result? So we were looking at that. So, we
Yeah.
did not engage in a lot of the things that society was doing simply because of the mental health dangers associated with children. And our children are, as a result right now, I think they're a lot healthier mentally and physically than so many of their other children. Their
Yeah.
age who
Yeah.
had to adhere to those restrictions. So yeah, I love what your father was saying, question everything. And we should do that. And I do that often as a foster parent. When the child's coming into my house and has this or that anxiety disorder, I'm questioning about it and doing my own research about it. And I start writing books to train other people about it. I recognize, so my wife and I had lost our first child. We had 3 healthy children. I was a teacher. She was a degree in psychology. When we became foster parents, we thought we were ready. We thought we knew everything. And 20 minutes into my first placement, I recognized I am not ready for this. I need to do some more research and learn a little bit more about this. So
Yeah.
it's continuing. Every time a child's placed in my home, I've got to learn new skills to help this child and give him the best support services that he needs because of what he's suffering from.
Right. I was going to say it's definitely something that I would imagine is more a lifelong journey, the journey of being a foster parent for as long as you're fostering, because it is a lifelong journey. Yes, but like it's also a lifelong learning process. You're never done. And it's funny to me, as an educator, kids say to me all the time, oh, like I hate school. I hate school. The irony is they always hate school. It's not learning that people hate. They always hate school. But that's a bit of a side tangent. We'll leave that for another discussion. But as an adult and as someone who wants to continue growing, you are going to have to keep learning. You're going to have to keep learning new things. It's when you stop learning that you stagnate as a human being. And do you want that for yourself? I don't think so.
Well, learning should never stop.
I am in agreement. I'm in agreement. Something else that I know that you really stress is communication, as communication between children and foster parents, and empowering children to have that sort of open communication. It's obvious that communication at a lot of levels plays a really important role in protecting our kids and safeguarding our children. Do you have any sorts of suggestions or tips maybe for parents, even if they're foster parent, if they're foster, biological, adopted, whatever the situation may be? Do you have any tips for parents who want to support an open and a trusting relationship with their children and want to encourage them to share their concerns and their experiences?
Engaging in conversation and communication and talking should have started at a very, very young age, and it should be daily. You're daily talking to a child. We sit down at a table and we have this box of cards and they're open-ended questions. So we'll pull out a card and it's an open-ended question. Everybody around the table goes around and answers the question their own way. And it just helps to engage children in conversation, help them learn social skills, that type of thing, self-confidence. And we do that daily. And we're always talking to the children, whatever it might be. Last night, one of my daughters and I we stood together in the kitchen and we were baking some breakfast casseroles for some visitors coming. And we were talking throughout the entire time. Early in the morning, my wife and I took our kids to church and we're talking to them throughout it. It's just ongoing conversation. Again, at a very, very young, early age. Because if you wait until later on, then you won't have that. Because that communication builds trust. That communication builds attachment. It builds relationships. It builds social skills. So many of our kids today don't know how to look somebody in the eye because they're spending all their time on their phone doing this. They don't know how to communicate. And as a result, they miss social cues. So if I to say something to you that's upsetting you and I'm there with you in person looking at you and I see that you're upset, well, I'm going to back off because in good conscience, because, I made a mistake. I said something I should have said. I'm going to back off. Online, they don't see that. They know those facial cues. So sometimes people just go all out and they express every single emotion they have, upsetting a lot of people, rocking the boat, if you will. They don't have those social cues or those facial cues to see that, hey, I might be upsetting somebody here. And I think that's where we're getting a lot of our divisiveness is because people have forgotten how to communicate one-on-one in a healthy fashion to somebody without a phone, without a laptop, without a computer.
Right.
I hate going to restaurants and I'll see 4 people at the same table and none of them talking to each other. They're all on their phone. I think to myself, well, why even going out together? What's the point?
Oh, I'm just laughing because I see the same thing. It's so funny. We'll go out to dinner, my husband and I, and we very specifically, neither of us owns a cell phone. We don't own a cell phone, because where we live, there's no cell phone service. So
Right.
that helps things, right? Now,
We had that for 20 years, right?
right. And so you get into the habit when you like when I close my laptop and step away, I'm done. Nobody's calling me. Like, I mean, okay, you can call me, but I'm not answering because it comes through my computer. Right. And so having that ability to step away and not have a phone at your hip all the time. Right. And it's to the point where, yeah, I totally think we'll go out for dinner and there will be 4 people sitting at a table. They'll all be on their phone. I'm like, what was the point? You might as well just stay at home and eat dinner at the kitchen table.
Right.
Like, what was the point of coming out to eat? Aren't you supposed to want to talk to each other, like have some conversation, enjoy each other's company? That's what you're here for. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. John. It's been a pleasure having you here. Just before we close out, tell our listeners, please, where they can find you, if they want more information, if they want to look you up, if they're curious to find out all about you, where are they going?
Thank you so much for asking. And at the Foster Care Institute, which I'm the director of, there is so much there, not necessarily for adoptive or foster parents, but for all parents, for mental health, for safety, well-being, and parenting skills as well. So you can go find that at the Foster Care Institute, or type in Dr. John DeGarmo, Foster Care Expert, and you'll go to my website, the Foster Care Institute. Lots of videos, articles, podcasts, you name it. I'm on social media, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, etc. Dr. John DeGarmo, Foster Care Expert. And then people can contact me any of those venues.
Perfect. Awesome. And for those of you who do know Star Students as a company and or visit our website, you know that, of course, we have a partner blog that actually went up the date before this podcast dropped. So all of those links will also be in the description for the blog and the description for the show notes. So, of course, there's multiple ways for you to find Dr. John here. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. I really appreciate it. I know that it's valuable.
Thank you so much. I enjoyed the conversation.